Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be another video on Payload CMS, but this time I'm going to focus on building a website with a content management system. It's not something that I've done before. I don't have a WordPress background. I don't really have a content management background, but what I'm going to try to do is step through how to use the components that are provided to you to help you build pages. So my primary focus in this video will be working with the blocks. So specifically creating a field with the type of blocks, and then showing how to create blocks to be used to generate a page, and then showing how to render those blocks in your website. In my example, I'm going to keep it really simple. I'll probably just have a hero block, maybe a content block, and then I want to show how to use forms. So I'll also be including the Form Builder plugin and kind of show how you can integrate all that to kind of just a simple landing page. So maybe a landing page to sign up for a newsletter or something like that. So that's what I'm going to try to build. As I said, this is kind of my second time actually trying to do this. I went through it once to get the basic understanding. So if you see that there's mistakes or things I'm doing wrong, please feel free to leave a comment. Like I said, I don't have a background in using content management systems. I don't have a background in WordPress. The whole idea and concept of layout and blocks is honestly completely new to me, and I'm learning it. All right, so thanks for stopping by. Let's get ready and get to some code. So we're going to just start with a blank template. So let's copy this command to create our new project. So I don't know why we're down here. Let's do this npx create payload app. I'm going to call this simple landing page. Simple landing page. We're going to use a blank template. We're going to use SQLite. And let's get this started. Okay, so let's change into our product, cd. What do I call this? Simple landing page. I did mention that I am going to use the Forms plugin, so let's just hop over to that and just install that now. Form Builder. We'll circle back around to all this later, but for now I just want to get all my libraries installed once. So let's go back over here and do an npm install. Okay, and I am using cursor, so cursor. Let me close the chat. We'll try to minimize the use of our chat. We'll just bring it up if we run into some problems. So let's open up our terminal. Let's get our app launched, npm run dev. And let's open it up here. All right, so now we got to create our new user. I'll use my adminmail.com, my general user, and then create. And this is your basic setup. And then let's also open up the front of the app so we can see what we have there. So this is the default front end. We're going to focus right now on setting up the backend collections. So let's go back over here to our code. And let's go into collections. And we're going to create a new collection. First, let's try to take better advantage of the page. Let's move our website over here to the side. Our website and our documentation. All right, and to get things started, we're going to create a pages collection. So we'll go into collection, file, and in our pages collection, we know we need to import the collection config. And we'll just take some of our type ahead and we'll trust that. And we want to do export default pages. We'll take that too. We know we need a title. And we need a slug. And we're going to make these two required. required. Let's remove that for now. All right, and then let's go into our payload config, and right here in our media, we're going to add our pages collection. We're going to import it. And let's go back over here to our backend. Let's blow this up a bit. And here's our pages collection. Oh, why is it not rendering? Oh, here we go. And for creating pages, you can see the 2 required fields. So that's what we wanted. So now we have a pages collection. So let's just put a title in here. This is the landing page. I'll call the slug. So now we have our page set up. So that's back in the admin console. Now we need to go do something with our website, because this is going to be our website. So to keep it simple, let's just open up our app. We'll go to our front end, and we're going to use this existing page here, and we're going to kind of clean it out and just use the stuff that we need. So let's we'll leave that stuff here for now. Let's remove all of this content. Oh, actually, I'm also going to remove these styles because I think they're just going to catch up to us and get in the way. We're going to remove all the styles. And let's go, where's my page? And so here I am, I'm back on my page. And let's also remove the class because we don't have a class or anything. So for this simple solution that we're building here, we need to start off by getting this page, because right now my page just has a title and it has a slug. And so I need to be able to query my CMS to get this page out from it. So the way I'm going to do that is we'll leave this get payload that we have in here, since this is a server, right? Since this is a server page, I can make asynchronous calls here. So I'm just going to query for the actual page that I want. So this will get me, so it's going to query and it's going to find this page. So if let's show my API. So the slug is landing page. So I'm saying query my pages collection. It's going to return a document, but then give me the first element in as my page. If I have no page, then page not found. Otherwise, we're going to render something. And so for now, we know that my page has a title. So we'll just render that there. So now let's run this and see what we get. Let me try to cancel this and run this again. All right, let's try one more time. And we get my title. This is the landing page. So we've loaded this first page in. I'm getting errors here. Pages, ID1, API. All right, so we're all good. So the basic idea is that I'm querying my content management system. I'm telling it the slug that I want of the page is loading all the information into this page object here, and then it's dumping it out. Right now, I only have a title in it. That's all I have. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next phase, and that's actually starting to integrate some of these blocks. So if we go back to the documentation, and let's look at blocks. All right, so blocks is incredibly powerful, storing an array of objects, and then based on these objects that you create in this block, you can add blocks to your layout. And then when someone comes in to create a page, they can select the different blocks that you created and kind of use these blocks as like Legos to build out their page. So like I said, we're going to have a hero. They call it banner here, but we'll call ours a hero. But first we need to kind of create our blocks layout inside our page. So let's go back to our page. Okay, so let's add a new field called layout, and inside that layout, we're going to start to add blocks. And like I said, we'll focus on our hero block first. All right, so this is our first block. Name is hero, and now we need to identify the fields that we want to include in it. And it's not name, this is slug. Slug's hero. And then we have specific fields that we want to include inside of here. I'll just use that for the placeholder. So we're going to have our heading. We'll have a subheading. And the subheading is going to be a little bit more. And since we want to include some styles in here, we're going to make this rich text. We definitely want to have some media. So we'll have an image that can be uploaded. And then we want to have some buttons. It's required. We're going to have our fields, which is a label, and then a URL to where the button needs to go. And we put the required down here. So now we have a block for our hero. It's going to have a heading, main text you want to see. It's going to have a subheading for any additional text you want to include underneath it. There'll be an image associated with the hero, and then there'll be a call to action button. We'll specify the label here. When the user clicks on it, it's the URL that we want them to go to. So that's our hero block. Now for style, not for styling, but for code organization, because we might end up with a lot of blocks, we probably want to, well, first let's make sure this works before we start kind of optimizing. So let's go back over to our admin collection. Let's refresh our page, and let's go back to edit. And so now when I click add layout, I have my new block that I've created called hero. And then I can add all of the information that I want to add into it. So let's kind of clean up some of this stuff. Like, let's see if we can fix this CTA button. So let's label, kind of make it look a little bit cleaner. That's call to action button and link. All right, so this is my block that I've just created, and I'm going to say, we are an awesome get the latest on Payload CMS. And then our subheading, sign up to get the latest tips and tricks on developing with Payload CMS. It's not just for websites. And let's save this. Oh, I didn't do my call to action. Let's say get for information. And then we just need a URL here, so I'll just use www. Clearly. So we have that all wrapped up. We need an image. So I'll just select any old image. So we'll save that. Hero. So now that's set. And now let's take a look at our API. Stay on the page, save, gotta make sure I save it. And now look at our API, and you can kind of see we're starting to build out the structure of our layout. So right now our layout has this block type called hero. And then these are all the different fields that are in it. My call to action button, my image, my subheading, which is in rich text, and my main heading for my layout for my hero object. So that's my hero object. And then now let's go back to our source code to kind of see how do we now render this hero object that I just created on my page. I need it to appear. Let's refresh my page. I need it to appear on my page here. So this is my page. So what's going to happen is all of this information. So let's change this, and let's just get it to put a P in here. And what we're going to do is just dump what we get in our layout so we can take a look at it. Just to have that. We're not going to take any specific thing out. What we're going to do is just JSON stringify this. So this is, like you said, this is the result of the API call, and I just want the layout so I can start to pull out the things that I want to utilize in my application. Now the thing is that as we kind of iterate through the layout, right now there's only one object, but ideally there'll be multiple objects, because if we go back to here, you can see this layout. Right now there's just my hero, but I'm going to add a form, and I'm going to also add a regular content section. So what will happen is we're going to need to be able to loop through the layout, and then based on the type of object it is, there'll be a specific way to render it. So if you look here, as I said, for this object, or we're only looking at the first one, I know the block type is hero. So I'm going to add a switch statement which will allow me to render the different block types as we loop through here. So let's start to put that into place right now. I'm just going to comment this out so we can uncomment it later and use it for debugging purposes. But now let's take a look at how we might create a way to kind of loop through the different types of objects that we get passed to us. So let's go up here, and so we're going to create this function called render blocks, and it's going to get passed in a specific block, and then we're going to switch based on the block type. So we'll get a block, and this is trying to tell me slug. We'll just take that here, but actually we want this to be block type. And so then we'll create a function for a hero block, and then what that will do is it will render the hero block based on the information that is passed in with this block object. Let's set our key. So we have the block ID. We need to create our hero block component for how that is rendered, but since we know we're going to get a bunch of other objects passed to us, we're going to need to add some new switch elements here. Let's add the default one first, which will return null if it doesn't match any of our types. And then down here at the bottom, we need to kind of loop through everything that we're provided and call our render block function. So kind of stepping back through what we said earlier, remember we get our page layout, we loop through the layout, and we pass the block to render block, and then render block based on the type of object that it has, it will render it. Right now we only have our hero block, and so that's all that we need to worry about rendering. So let's create our hero block component. So we'll go to our front end, we'll create components, we'll create hero block. All right, and just to kind of get a basics here, let's go back and look at what we're going to get on our API call. So we know we're going to get a heading, we know we're going to get a subheading, so let's do this. Let's take the code that it's giving us. We're not going to take this approach because we're going to leverage the rich text component. And let's import the rich text component. I believe this is data. And then we have our image, and then we have our alt text for our image. Why isn't it block? Image. All right, why is it not taking that properly? Let's use the next image component. All right, and then this is complaining because it doesn't know if it is a media object or not. So let's kind of wrap this with some code. I think I can actually simplify this a little bit by doing some destructuring up here in my block. So we have our block and our subheading, and then we need to say block image. And so if it is an object and I have a URL, then render my image. We'll set the width and height. And then down here we have our CTA, our call to action, which has the URL to go to, and then this is the text for the button label. We have our heading, And then we have our rich text rendered. So no styling or anything, but just kind of showing how we can get this information here. We need to import our HeroBlock. All right, so here's our hero. It's not very pretty, but it's rendering our content how we wanted it to. And here's our get more link. What does this page return? Do I have some code somewhere that shouldn't be? Oh, this div. That return doesn't belong there. So let's see if we can kind of clean this up a little bit to make it look a little bit better. It will help. So now we have our little button here. And let's see what we can do with our image. Let's see if we can just kind of center this whole thing in the page. We don't want to center it like vertically. We just want to center everything horizontally. There we go. There's our hero. All right, let's just add a border around all of this so that it's clear what is what. We don't want our height to be the whole screen, so let's remove that. And that shows us that we probably want a little bit of padding. And so this now is our hero. And let's just clean this up and remove the page title. So now we have our first component. So we have our hero component. So now let's go back to our CMS, go back to pages here and do a little cleanup. Since we're going to add some additional blocks, let's start to kind of manage the structure of our application better. So we're going to take this whole hero block structure right here, and we're going to move it to its own component. And so what we'll do is outside here, we'll create a blocks folder, and inside of here, we'll create hero block. And we'll just export block. Let's import block from there and do it like that. And then we should be able to just take all of the fields from our pages here, take all this stuff and copy it over. Remove it from here, go to hero blocks and paste it in here. And so now this is completely separated, kind of in its own little structure, and then we just go back over here and we had hero block. And then let's import it. And then everybody should be happy. So let's go back to our admin, refresh the page, and everybody's happy. We still have our hero block there, but our application is structured a little bit better. So let's just add another block here. But this time we're going to start off by creating it directly over here. We'll just call it just a regular content block. We'll kind of follow the same pattern. And what do we want in our content block? It's going to be pretty simple. We're going to have our rich text, and let's create a heading field. And that's about it. We just want a place to have some text and a title to go along with it. So that's our content blocks, and now we can go back to our pages, and we can add our content block. And let's refresh here. So now you can see we can add another layout, content. This is some interesting why sign up with us. Let's add some rich text. We'll do an unordered list. We are awesome. No one is better. Us. If you don't, you will miss out. Actually, let's just remove this. We'll just leave this here. As I'm thinking about this, maybe you don't want a heading, but we'll just leave it here. I just want to demonstrate how you can integrate the rich text. And so that's kind of why I've done this. Well, that's it. So now when we save, let's save this. Let's take a look at our save. Let's go back. look at the API, you can see now in our layout, we have two objects. We have our hero object up at the top. Our block type is hero. And then now we have our new block type, which is content. Let's go back to our template, and we want to show our content block next. And we're going to keep our content block simple. First, we need a way to render it. So let's go back to our front end, our page. We need to add a new section here, case content, return content block, block ID. Let's go into our front end components. So hero, why is this complaining? Well, I think maybe it's complaining because of the error. So let's fix our error first. So let's create another component. We'll copy most of this stuff here. Content block, we don't need this. All we really need to do is just render the content. What's this error? All right, so I've structured my types incorrectly. I did a quick look back on the documentation, and it looks like I did it wrong here too, so let me fix that. So let's add a type up here for my properties. So we're going to take our layout and we're going to extract from our layout the type of hero, and that will give us our props. And then we can say our block should be hero props. All right? So now if you look at hero props, you can see it just has the fields that are specific to my hero. And then we're going to do the exact same thing in my content block. So we'll go up here to content block. We'll change this to content props. And the same thing, we look for the block type and we extract that from there, and then we set content props there. And then now when we look at content prop, we see we get the stuff we need, which is the content, which is this rich text object, and the heading. So here we will just do this. We'll just say div. I think I can just drop my heading here. Make sure I'm consistent. Export default, block. Okay, now let's refresh. Content block is not defined. Did I not import it? Let's import it. Content block is imported. And so now my content is rendered. And you can see I get my bullet items, so I know my rich text is coming through. And we have our content block. And so now let's do one last one where we actually include a form. And so this brings us back to payload documentation, and let's take a look at the Form Builder plugin. So I've already imported it. I need to go down and do some configuration. So let's go to payload config. Down here, I will just add the basics. Form Builder, no. Form Builder plugin. Take the default fields. So I don't need to add anything new here. And I have my import there already. So now I have the ability to use plugins. I have a completely separate video on plugins, which I'll link below. So I'm not going to go too deep into it here. All I'm going to say is that the Form Builder plugin allows us to create forms, and I'll show you how I create a form, and then it also manages how the form submissions are saved into Payload CMS for you. But the rest of the stuff, like I said, is covered in my video, which I'll link below. So now that I added the form plugin, let's add a form. We're going to add a form to our layout. So let's go back to our pages. And let's take a look here. I'll cover this again, but these two collections were created, the forms collection, which is where I create all my forms, and then the form submissions, which is where the submissions of my forms go. So here we're going to create a new form, and we're going to call it newsletter. Newsletter form 1. We're going to add a field. We're going to add a text field. First name. Lowercase, no special characters. Oh, I see what it's saying. First name, label as first name. We'll just leave it as, we'll say it's required. Get another field. Last name. It said no special characters, so let's remove that. We'll say that's required also. We'll add a new field. Email. We'll say that's required. Our submit button will be sign up. So when they click the button, we'll just have a message. Thanks for signing up to our newsletter. So now we have a newsletter form. And we're going to include this form in our page. So let's go back over here to, not this page, but to our page collection. And we need to add another block on here. So let's go over here, and we're going to be very specific, and we're going to create a new, not in the front end, sorry, blocks. This is on the content management side. We're going to call this newsletter form block, because we might have different types of form blocks. So that's why we're being very specific and saying newsletter form block. And follow the same pattern as before. Export const newsletter form block. Let's close this out. Newsletter form block is a type of block. And then we need to add our fields. But let's first add our slug, newsletter form. And I think that we'll leave some heading text. We'll make that required as false, so you don't necessarily need it. And then what we'll do is we'll create the actual form. So this is name, and that's a relationship. All right, so we added the relationship to the form table. So this will allow me to select the form that is associated with this newsletter form block. So let's save that. Hopefully this error will get corrected when I rebuild. All right, let's rebuild it. I think what's happened is that my schema is getting jacked up by me constantly adding new stuff to it. But let's see. It doesn't matter where early on, if I have to delete my schema and just rebuild, it's okay. Okay, looks like everything kind of cleaned itself up. Let's reload. All right, so I have my form. Now let's add my form to my page. And let's see, I have my form block. I need to go to my page in my collection and add my form block here, my newsletter form block, import it. And so now when I come here, I can add a new layout, a newsletter form, don't miss out, sign up now, and then I can select my form, and my form will now be included in my block. So now when I save this, included in my layout. So now when I save this, if you take a look at the API, go down our layout. This last one is our form, and it has a reference to newsletter form 1, which looks for first name, last name, email address, and then it has a submit button label, and then it has a confirmation message that gets rendered, and that's it. So now, back to the front end, same process as before. We want to render our newsletter sign up form down here at the bottom. So let's go back to, we're done with our blocks in the back end, but now we're on our front end. So we're going to have a block here for our newsletter. Which one's the simplest one? Let's copy our content block because it looks easy. So we'll just say copy, paste, rename newsletter. Spell this right. Newsletter block. And let's go in here and kind of clean some of this up. Newsletter props, extract from newsletter form, newsletter block, newsletter props, and then let's kind of just render the stuff that we have. All right, so we're in the newsletter, and we have our props from the newsletter. let's get this information and render it on the page. All right, so the first part is that we are only, this component only renders this specific newsletter form 1. So we need to make sure that that is the form that's getting passed in here. There's a bunch of different ways we can do it, but for now, we're just going to check the type of the form. We're going to take a look at the form title and base it on that. So here what we're doing is we're taking our block that got passed in, we're getting the form object, and then we're checking the form title to make sure it matches newsletter form 1, which is what we have here. If it does match newsletter form 1, then next step is to iterate and get these fields, so the first name field, the last name field, then an email address field, and then have a kind of submit button. So the best approach is to probably put this inside of a form. And let's put a placeholder in here for our handle submit. And now let's kind of lay out the rest of our fields. So let's iterate through it so that we're kind of sticking to the general approach of providing the back-end user the ability to customize the form. So if they wanted to change the order of how these things were rendered, they could do it on the back end and it wouldn't require any changes on the front end. So to make that work, that means we need to kind of loop through all of the form fields. So we get the block, and then we get the form, and then we get the form fields. And then we, not the name, we do want the field name. Why is this not, let's just do this for now. So we're going to take the field name, and we're going to take the name, the label. So let's look at this. The type should not be type. The type needs to be block type, and the field name. And then, so this should loop through and give us all of the fields. So the first name, the last name, then the email address. Then down here on the bottom, we have our submit button. And this actually should be the text that the submit button label, actually. And if it's not provided, we'll just say submit. So that is that text. So let's see what we got rendering so far. Oh, I didn't add my block to my page. So let's go back to my page and let's add this new one, our newsletter form, our newsletter block, and let that roll. Okay. All right, because I'm doing submit, this newsletter block has to be a client. So let's set this to use client. And we see we now have our fields, our first name, our last name, and our email address. And then our sign up button. Is that correct? Yeah, because it doesn't say submit, so that's how we know we're getting our proper data. Let's see if we can clean this up a little bit. All right, looks a little bit better, not styled perfectly, but when again, that's not the purpose of all this. The purpose of all this is to just get this stuff on the page. Let's make these fields, let's see. There we go. So we have our form, we have our input information. Let's put a little bit of padding on the bottom. All right, so now we have our form loaded. The next thing is we need to actually capture the input from the form, and so we can submit it. So there's a submit, our type. Let's set our IDs. A little styling around everything. All right, now let's handle our submit. There's a little bit more space here. We also didn't put our required check on here. So if the field's required, we want to make sure it's required. Let's set the placeholder. I didn't add a placeholder type, so let's just use label. All right, so now we have our labels. Now let's handle our on submit. All right, so let's go roll it back up here to our handle submit. Let's start adding some state variables because we're going to need them. So the first thing we want to do is prevent the default behavior. Then let's make sure that we actually have the information that we need from our form. This is our block, sorry. Now let's get all the data from our form and let's get our objects. For now, let's just console log this so we can make sure we're getting the right data. So let's put my basic information in. Let's click sign up. Let's take a look here, see what our object is. And so we are getting the information that we want from our form. Now we just got to make sure we submit it properly. We're going to track some form states so that we can update the UI appropriately. So let's add Let's create our type for form state. We don't want payload's form state. We have our own form state. So let's put that up here. Let's remove this rich text because we don't need that. So there's our imports. Here's any of our types. And here's our function. Let's just kind of space that out a bit. Okay. So now here, let's go put something around this guy. Handles a form submission. All right, so, okay. We already confirmed that we have the appropriate data. Let's set our form state. And now let's try to submit the information to the form. So let's put this all in the try catch block. Let's change this to async. We saw the results of this. So it's going to give us a set of name value pairs for the data that we need. We don't post to, when you're using the form builder, you don't post to this specific API route. There's a specific route that you need to post to. It's this API form submission. The type is a post. Let's make sure we get our headers in here. It's application JSON. The data that we post is structured differently. So let's kind of just break it down inside of here. So what is needed is you need the form ID. So you say form block.form.id, and then this is submission data. And since we've already kind of broke it down, this needs to be submission data, and then we need to loop over the objects, and then we need to map them to a field and a value, because that's the way that the form submission is looking for the data coming in. And this should be object from entries form data, should actually be form data.entries. All right, so then down here, now we're going to loop through that same key value pair object, except we just want the entries. Then we're going to loop through that data, and then we're going to create our own structure because that's the way that the system needs it. The system needs to have a field value and then values. That's the way that it needs to see an array of information passed for the submission. This is actually submission data. And let's make sure that the data that's passed is a string, so value as string. And that should be the appropriate way to submit the data that we pulled from our fields, from our form. Important to pass the ID, important to pass the submission data with this field and value. So that's why we needed to do this map here. And that should submit the data. If there's an error, we're just going to throw an error, failed to submit form. If not, we're going to update the state. So we're no longer loading. There's no error. Success is true. After that, we want to reset the form. So to do that, we're going to try this. Let's just comment what this is doing. Reset the form. Actually, let's change this because I want to take advantage of the other field that we added. We added this, this confirmation message. So we want to add the confirmation message if everything was okay. And we also want to kind of leave a little bit of a delay, because what we're going to do is after it's submitted, we're going to show the confirmation message, and then we're going to clear the confirmation message out. If there was an error, we'll console log it, and then we'll just kind of display this error message. Okay, now let's kind of manage the button state down here. Right now, you're going to submit the button, and we want the button to kind of get disabled when our state is in a disabled state while we're kind of loading. And then we also want to display information if this was successful. So first, outside of the form here, actually we'll stay inside the form right above the button. Let's display an error message. All right, so if I got my form state error, then we're going to display the form state error message. If I have success, see, it's going to display this form submitted successfully, but here we want it to actually display our, we want it to display our success message, which is rich text. So if my form state is success, then use our rich text component and take the confirmation message that we have from here underneath our confirmation message and display it. Thanks for signing up to our newsletter. But let's change this like I said. So what happens when the form state is success, that means it's not submitting. So what we want to do is render our message and hide our button. But then when the state switches at a success, see here we have this 5-second timeout. So what will happen is that, did I put it in here? So form state, loading is true, error. If everything's good, I think I need to set my state in here to success first so that it displays the message, and then give it 5 seconds to clean itself up. Yeah, that's what I want to do. So right after it's done, so if OK, set loading to false, there's no error, success is true. Let's move this up. Let's reset the form so it clears out the form. But since success is true, what will happen is that down here, my confirmation message will show and my button will be hidden. We don't want to show the button if it's done. And after 5 seconds, it will clear out the success, so the button will show, and then I believe it will also clear out the error message. Yep, so it'll clear everything out, and then the form should get back to normal. So let's see if we got it right in this first shot. So let's refresh. Try again. See if we get our state. So sign up. All right, so it's switched. I got a couple of errors. So I get my thanks for signing up, and then it clears back. But let's see what my errors were. Oh, it's this P thing again. So let's go down here and let's just change this to a div. Let's save. Let's close this. Refresh. Let's sign up again with another email address. Thanks for signing up. And then refresh back and clears. So now let's go take a look at our backend. Let's look at our form submission. And you can see this is the first form submission, first name, last name with error not clearly native. And this is the second form submission with the info at clearly native. So just wrapping up, because I'm going to wrap up here, like there's definitely more that we can do. Obviously, we can kind of clean up this UI. We can add other components. We can add some error checking. But I just wanted to keep this very simple and very basic to kind of get a beginner to understand how you construct these pages using layouts, blocks, fields, and forms. So hopefully you found this helpful. I will provide all the source code for this. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks again.